So, just a couple of music-related things. Do you have any albums that you've been listening to that have been catching your attention, or
Yeah.
anything else?
Yeah, 2022 was an interesting year, I think, for music. Um, I mean, still really, really rocking that Mortuous album from last year. That was like the top flight shit for me. Like
Totally.
I listened to so much death metal, and I do feel like I don't want this to be a knock, but I do feel like there's getting to be a little bit of sameness in the genre right now. There's like a lot of bands that are kind of doing the same general thing. Or I'm like, well, I listened to this one band that sounds like this. How many more bands do I need to listen to that sound that way? And that Mortuous record, I think, separated itself from the pack.
It's a step above
Quite
for sure.
Yeah, step above. Just the performances on it, the songwriting was really really fantastic. It's like the kind of death metal I like. It's like not shy about there being fast parts. I've been a little bit kind of getting down on like the slower stuff. I'm like, come on,
It's
guys.
a lot of mid-tempo stuff, yeah.
Yeah, death metal's fast. Like that's why I got into it. Like my musical trajectory was like, the usual like I got into like hard rock from the local hard rock station. I remember
Hmm.
like I heard like Soundgarden Spoon Man, like when Super Unknown was released, and they were playing that shit out of that song. And
Yeah.
I remember that being like the first ever guitar riff that I ever thought was cool. I'm like, well, that's a cool guitar part. I should learn to play guitar. That would be really neat. And then I got into like thrash metal. Like I got into Metallica, and then got into thrash metal. Got into Slayer, and as soon as I heard Slayer, I was like, oh, you could play fast like this. This is a way you can play music really fast. And that pretty much dictated all the music I've listened to since then. Or I'm like, I just want it fast. So like I got into death metal because I'm like, it's fast. It's fast like Slayer. I got into hardcore punk because I'm like, I heard like the Dead Kennedys and God We Trust Incorporated was like, this is fast like Slayer. Ergo, I like it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I got into stuff because it was fast. And so it's the same thing as like death metal. I'm like, death metal's good when it's fast. Like things should sound like Altars of Madness. Like that's my
Oh,
that's my
hell yeah.
so it's like albums should sound like Altars of Madness.
Now,
So albums that are like good, like heavy on 1 foot blast beats is kind of my thing. That's what I love.
okay. Now, I got to ask, like, so I'm a drummer as well, but I'm not a metal drummer per se. I'm more like a prog rock drummer.
Yeah.
So you like listening to fast music, but do you like playing fast too, or do you prefer?
Yes.
You do,
Yes.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, I play drums and right now I'm in 2 hardcore bands.
Hmm.
One of which, Wallbreaker, is an established band I just joined. Like their drummer moved away before the pandemic, and they needed to get a new drummer after things kind of opened back up. So I auditioned, and I have been unashamedly making the band faster since I joined them. Me and the guitar
Nice.
player have been writing all new music. We're just like Poison Idea. Let's just go for like Poison Idea and Totalitar and like a bunch of like North American and Scandinavian fast hardcore stuff. Let's just go for that. So I've been unabashedly making the band faster as their drummer. And then we started a band, me and Jeremy, or the guitar player, we started another band called Grim Statistic. We're actually practicing tomorrow. And that is more of a like, kind of like 90s and early 2000s kind of blast beat hardcore band. So we're like really into
Okay.
like Drop Dead and like there was a bunch of German fastcore bands I was really into. I really like stuff like Widespread Bloodshed from that period. Just fast hardcore, but with lots of blast beats in it. So that's also so yes, I like to play fast. I was in a fastcore band in the 2000s called Brainiacs. That's a little bit of a cult band for some people. But that was another thing. We had like nothing but like 25-second songs where we would try to play as many parts in a 25-second song as you could possibly manage to fit. That was the whole point of the band. It was like you could never get used to us doing something because it changed immediately. We would have like a slow part that would be sort of like it would sound kind of moshy, but we would play like a measure and a half before going to something else. So it was fun to play shows because you'd see kids start to dance and then the song's over with. Oops, sorry guys. Next song. So I love fast music. Like ever since I really got into music on my own, like fast music has been like the touchstone for me. It's been like I come back to fast music as like the thing I want to listen to. I played in a doom metal band years ago, and that was fun too. Like I do like slow stuff, and I do enjoy kind of developing my slow chops, because that's like a whole different mindset and a whole different way to play.
Totally.
But I think my heart is always with like just stupidly fast music that's fast for the sake of being fast.
Are you primarily self-taught drummer, or did you take lessons?
Yeah, so I took guitar lessons when I was in high school and junior high, and I primarily played guitar. And then when we started Brainiacs, which was like in like 2003 or 2004, we did not have a drummer. And I had like always been like the guy in whatever band I was in who would like annoyingly get on the drummer's drum set and try to play. And so I had picked up a few things. Like I could kind of like I could kind of play a beat well enough. Like I wasn't like completely lost. I had several years of like messing around in drummers' drum sets where I could play like a couple of basic rock beats and stuff.
Right.
But we were looking for a drummer for Brainiacs. My friend Zach was like, our guitar player at the time was like, you should just play drums. Like whatever. We're gonna sound like Laram anyway. It's gonna be literal just noise. Like the original brief for that band was like just like noise hardcore. We're gonna act like we don't know how to play our instruments anyway. And as it always happens with that stuff, we ended up getting good. Like we didn't intend to. It was completely unintentional. But then I basically kind of learned how to play drums on accident. And then started to get really into it. Like after that, it was like, well, now I'm like actually watching drum tutorials now and like figuring out how to actually play like a real drummer. Why am I doing this? Oh, because I'm enjoying it actually. Yeah. But it's still like I still try to play fast stuff. I'm always like, trying to keep my blast beat polished.
Totally. And you lean more towards like a 1 foot blast usually?
Yeah, I'm not a double kick drummer. I don't use the double kick at all. Like I like the I kind of like the way it forces you to think really strategically about how to do things.
Yeah, by having like a limitation, you can be more creative. It's one of those kind of things.
Yeah, I really, really enjoy I don't know, I find it because it's physical, and also because I get to be like the engine of the part that I love, which is the fast drums. Like I was that guy who's always, no matter, even though I play guitar, I was always watching the drummer whenever we go see bands, and I'm always watching the drummer like, man, that guy's fucking cool. Like, whoa, look at that move. It's almost like the same as being an artist. I watch drummers for what they do as much as I look at artists for what they do, and like try to incorporate stuff. Like I hear something I really like, I'm going to try to imitate it, figure out how to do it.
Totally.
So yeah, that's the thing.
What about like Nonmetal? What would be like a surprise, album or band that you like a lot?
Nonmetal. I mean, I listen to a lot of. I love obviously a lot of 80s synth pop. We talked about Tears for Fears. I'm a big Tears for Fears fan. I think my collection of 80s stuff is quite developed. I'm a big fan of like 70s, 80s AOR, like arena-oriented rock. Like I freaking love. I love Survivor and I love Journey.
Like Toto.
Oh man, I was actually just finally got like Hydra on CD, like one of those rock.
Oh yeah.
I fucking love that record. So I love that kind of stuff. A lot of like a lot of goth stuff and dark wave stuff from the 80s, and some of the more recent stuff too. I listen to quite a bit of that. I'm trying to think what else. Like, I mean, obviously a lot of punk and hardcore punk and like post-punk new wave stuff that's like adjacent to that. Quite a bit of that stuff too. I'm a big fan of old like obscure 80s hardcore stuff that's like, yeah, this band put out one 7-inch. They put out one 7-inch. It's like 4 minutes long, and they played like 19 songs because they played really, really fast. Like they can't play their instruments. I'm into it. I'm totally into it.
Nice.
Trying to beat each other to the end of the song. That's the kind of shit that I love.
More will than skill. There's somebody who said that, and I like that saying. Yeah. Now, what's like a band or an artist that you think is maybe overrated or you don't really like that conventionally most people like?
Man, I don't want to know if I want to. Like,
don't say anybody who's like out and out. Like, say somebody who's not going to affect you. Like, I personally do not like CCR, Creedence Clearwater Revival. I don't like them. I really don't.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to think about some bands that I've tried to get into over the years that are like kind of classics that I've just not. I don't really like the Doors. Like that's a big one for me. Like people are always talking like. When I was in high school, like kids were ape shit for the Doors, and I was like, I don't get it. Like I would listen to it and be like, I don't get it. You know, like just doesn't really.
I don't grab for them much.
Yeah, it doesn't. Whatever it is, it's not hitting my ear the way it's hitting other people's ear. You know.
I do really like that late 60s kind of like garage psych, like kind of summer of love stuff though, like because you can just tell like the innocence in that time. Like the album Love Forever Changes is one of my favorites. Zombies, Odyssey and Oracle. Like that's a kind of area that's really fun as like a collector to dive into as well, because it's like you want to like hear about the band that released the one single and you know it was like released once. Like the hunt is really exciting for that genre. No, I can definitely feel that. I know our my buddy Jeremy is also like really into a lot of like late 60s garage stuff too, so he's like constantly kind of talking about stuff to me about it. So that's like an area I feel like I should get more into, but for whatever reason, like I'm not at that point in my life where I've had time to get into it. And it always feels like, I mean, that's another thing too. We talk about like getting into music. It always feels like there's so much stuff to listen to. Mm-hmm. I never have the opposite. I'm not that one of those people who's like, there's like nothing good. It's just a few good albums. There's like nothing good to listen to. I'm always one of those like, I don't have time to listen to everything good. I want to listen to everything good, and I don't have time to listen to all of it. Everything is like, have you heard this yet? And I'm like, I'm saving it for later because I have so much stuff on my plate right now. I'm always trying to find new stuff, or you know. I know exactly what you mean.
It's like going back through the archive can be kind of daunting too, because I'm like, there's so much. What do I start with? What if I like it all? Then I have to buy. I have to collect all of it. Oh no, you know that becomes a whole other thing too. Like I'm always worried. Like, what if I get really into this? Oh boy, like
there goes $100.
Yeah, there's another thing that I'm really into. Oh my god, to go along with the huge number of things I'm already really into. So, yeah.
Besides like art and music, do you have any other things that you're really passionate about?
Yeah, I think so. My wife and I really enjoy cooking. Like that's like we definitely spend, like whenever we look for a place to live, the kitchen is like the number one consideration, because we're like, well, we're going to spend most of our time in there. So cooking is like a kind of a big like part of our relationship, but it's also just like, I don't know, I kind of, when I first kind of like moved out of my parents' house and was living on my own, that was also a big thing, was like, my mom was like, you need to be self-sufficient. Like, so you need to know how to like cook for yourself. And I kind of took that to heart. I spent a lot of time kind of learning how to cook too when I was like single and living on my own in my first apartments. So that's kind of something I'm passionate about. I'm very passionate about food. I grew up in a multicultural household. My grandmother's from Japan. So Japanese food is like a big thing. Like I grew up with a lot of it, but I also grew up with what my grandmother could improvise from, you know, like, you know, she didn't really cook when she lived in Japan. Mm-hmm. And so she sort of like had to like go back and like learn how to make all of these dishes on her own, with what she could find in America, you know.
Right.
Not necessarily always having that stuff. It's much more available now, but even when I was a kid, it was kind of hard to find a lot of Japanese ingredients. So like making like Japanese food and like eating Japanese food is like a big thing in my household. It's a big thing I'm kind of passionate about. I mean, I love to read. I spend a lot of time reading. I brought a couple books.
Yeah, please. The show and tell part.
Yeah, the show and tell part. So these were, I just brought two, but these are like two books that were really when I was in grad school. Okay, I'll wait till you.
I'm sorry, I just haven't done this, and I did the blowing up.
Take your time.
And I actually just hit remove on you, so I'm sorry about that. Let's see if I can. Oh my god, why is this harder than I thought? Somebody's gonna tell me in the comments like how to do this, and I'll figure it out later. Well, here, I got you up. Go ahead, show.
Okay. So these were just like two books that were really influential and kind of mind-blowing when I was in grad school. And so the first one, I don't know if a lot of people know about this one. It's a book called Cyclonopedia by the philosopher and thinker and mathematician and weirdo Reza Negarestani. So this was a book I was turned onto by one of my advisors, who was not in the art department. And we got to, one of my favorite things about that program was we got to seek advisors for our thesis committees from outside of the department. So I went over to the English department, found a professor of American literature named Kate Marshall, who is working on like the alien and like the non-human in literature. And so she's like, you know, like looking at like Lovecraft, but also like, so like the American weird, like the weird fiction that we're all kind of aware of from like the 20s and 30s, but also like what was kind of termed the new weird in the last like maybe 10 or 15 years, 20 years, which included like for her like Cormac McCarthy and a lot of other writers. So she turned me on to a lot of this stuff, and she told me I should read Cyclonopedia, actually lent me her copy of it. This is my copy. And it was really just a mind-blowing book. It's basically, it's like theory fiction is what Nagarastani kind of called it. It kind of comes out of like a guy named Nick Land, who was also doing the same thing in like the 90s and early 2000s. And the idea is it's like written like it's a theory book, but like all of the people and scholars and stuff mentioned in it and all of like the events that might be mentioned in it are completely fictional. But the theory that it's doing is like really like weird, cool stuff. So this is a book basically like kind of a theory fiction book about like the Middle East and about like this scholar in the Middle East who doesn't actually exist, a fictional scholar. It's like a book about his disappearance, but it basically goes through his like this fictional scholar's work on the Middle East and on like the characteristics of petroleum, basically. So the byline of the book is complicity with anonymous materials, and what the anonymous materials is petroleum. So he's basically like develops this long drawn out like thermodynamic vision of like why humanity is the way it is, and it's like he refers to petroleum as the black corpse of the sun, and talks about basically how like war is something that humans do to exhaust all the excess energy that comes from the sun. Some of it's just trapped as petroleum. Basically creates this picture of the universe where like humans aren't really totally in charge of anything, and in fact like we are unconsciously just like acting out the like impersonal like forces of nature that are like kind of at work in the universe, such as like the excess energy that's created by the sun. Like the sun has kind of a major like a part in this book. And it's like I'm not doing anything at all like justice to how like insanely like nightmarish and like frenetic the actual prose is in this book. It's like an incredibly visual book when I read it, so it like was really inspiring for me to sort of make images from it. Another book, I think people probably have heard of this one, is In the Dust of This Planet. Eugene Thacker, his Horror of Philosophy series. There's 3 books in this series. I just chose those 2. There's like a ton of other books that have been really influential on me, but those 2 in particular because they are really great gateways into a strand of philosophy that was called Speculative Realism that kind of had its big day in philosophy in like the late 2000s, the latter half of the 2000s, and then it's kind of been booted out of academic philosophy as being a little too subversive. And it's found more of a place in like literature, literary studies, film theory, things like that. A lot of artists had gotten really into speculative realism too. And it's basically this idea, like it's trying to, there's like a whole bunch of different, like even kind of contradictory philosophical ideas like within it. But the main thing is that that there is like a real world independent of human beings, and that world sort of affects human beings in the first instance rather than the other way around. Like, you know, like one of the ideas that kind of comes out of speculative realism is this notion of like new materialism, which is like a kind of an update of like Marxist historical materialism. This idea that like matter isn't this thing that is waiting for humans to act on it and you know cause things to happen in the universe. It's actually the other way around. We are being acted on by matter. In fact, we're made of matter. Like the whole condition of even having mind is a property of matter. And so therefore we're we're like the ones that are constantly responding to the agency of matter, like the ability of matter to like make things happen in the universe. And so it's this idea, it's like very, very much like an anthropocentric idea. It's very much based on sort of pushing human beings out of the center of the cosmos. Kind of the way I always think of it is
probably is.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of people theorize like the speculative realist stuff was a response to climate change, right? Like climate change is this big kind of dethroning of like human will and mastery as kind of the most important operator in the universe. It's like, oh no, we didn't see this one coming. So clearly the universe has other things and other plans in mind than just like humans being the pinnacle. So I really got into that stuff. It was very, very because I was, I still am very interested in like the non-human as like a category. One of the things I always like to say is like the human being is just one example of the non-human. Like we're just one kind of non-human amongst lots of other non-humans. I don't know if you remember the interior jacket design I did for illustration that I did for Outer Heaven's first record. I may only have the one right now. There was just a second one.
And who did the cover? Do you remember?
Matt Sticker did the cover.
Matt Sticker did? Okay.
Yeah.
He's bargain bin blasphemy, right?
Yes,
yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he's someone I look at, like I said, his compositional work and his like his color theory in particular, I find really, really to be quite sophisticated and really, really refined. So I kind of look at him as like, okay, how can I like make better compositions? But I did the inside, that inside drawing was one of those ones that was originally, I was just going to be using it for my own thing. And they approached me asking me if I had anything. So I was like, well, I just finished this drawing. And they're like, we want it. But it was that image was originally going to be a print that had the title "Shed Your Human Camouflage" over top. It was like the drawing was supposed to be like the John Carpenter Thing, and the Thing alien. And I always loved the idea that we're all Thing aliens. Actually, we just don't know it. If you imagine the alternate ending to the Thing, where it like got off of Antarctica and infected the entire world, and now we're all just walking around pretending to be human, but none of us are. I think that's actually how it is. It's actually how it really is. We are really all just pretending to be human. We're not really human. That's just something we made up in the 16th, 17th century. This idea of the Enlightenment.
Like we have an existential crisis later, man.
Yeah, no.
I see all this stuff. I mean, when you really think about the universe is so much bigger than Earth, and
oh yeah, and we only evolved to live on this planet. So you imagine all the stuff that we did not evolve to contend with or to even comprehend. I like to think we are limited beings in terms of our perspective and our capabilities, and we are also dependent on like the non-human world for our existence. So that was like a big thing for me in grad school. It still is a big thing that really drives the kind of art that I make. Like you'll notice there's some stuff that I don't really do. I don't really like to do like sexy lady drawings. It's just not really. It's not really. It doesn't really align with my philosophical and political interests that much. So I shy away from it. I just prefer to be the cosmic horror monster guy, and like I will do that stuff. I love to do like rotting corpses. I think those are great because I think the rotting corpse is like sort of this image of the troubling lack of boundary between the human being and its environment. If like decay really is like your environment mixing with you mixing with the environment, and there being no more like boundary between those two things. So I love that as an image. I'm always kind of marshaling like body horror and melting bodies and that stuff because it questions the idea of this impregnable human being that's unchanging over time or whatever. It's these Enlightenment humanist ideas that we've inherited. Not to get too political, but have been, of course, like totally fostered by capitalism. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff. So those two books were really kind of key texts for me in kind of figuring out who I am as an artist and like what I am interested in and what I kind of believe about the universe. I think it's important to have like a worldview. I think if you have a worldview, if you have a perspective, then that's going to come out in your work one way or the other, even if you're not like constantly flogging it as the reason that your work exists. I think it's good to have a motivation for what you do, because it it can provide like a good basis for the decisions that you make, you know?
Yeah. Do you feel like in the last 10 years that commitment to having more meaning, like, I guess my point is everyone has that period in their art, you know, sometimes I still definitely do, where I'm just like, I just want to draw something cool. But you're like, I want to draw something cool, but it aligns with these things that are like bigger than me too. I just think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like a basis for it. I mean, there are other times when I'm like, I just want to draw like a cool sword and sorcery scene. Like, I don't like, there's nothing to it other than like the pure pleasure of making that image, you know. So it's not like it's in there all the time. But I think even when it's not, even when you're not thinking about it, I think those kind of ideas are still operating in the background. You know what I mean? They're still driving your decisions even when you're not conscious of it. So I think having that in there and, you know, I guess just like being curious about the world is like an important part of being an artist, whether you're an illustrator or a studio artist or a filmmaker or whatever, musician. I think being curious about the world. I mean, we all live in the world, right? You can't always. I have to do this with students all the time, like really push them. Like, you can't just make stuff about yourself because you're the only person that's interesting to. You know what I mean? Like, you're the only person who's that interested in the subject of you. We all live in the world, though, and if you can show interest in the world, other people will find a reason to be interested in what you're doing. And so I was like, yeah, just read, be curious, like, you know, like look at science. You know, if you're not interested in politics, there's still lots of other things to do. Look at science, look at philosophy. You know, like I said, like for me, the speculative realism stuff was really cool because it goes against so much of what we're taught in like kind of both like mainstream culture, but also just how we're taught like about the history of philosophy. Like the whole point of speculative realism was to kind of be like fuck the history of philosophy. We're gonna break with Kant. We're gonna break with liberal humanism. We're gonna say no. There is like this non-human universe that actually exists, even when we're not thinking about it. It's still there. It's still doing shit. Actually, we're made out of it. We're actually made out of that universe too. And so you're also a gross non-human monster. We all are. That's awesome. Right? That's like my favorite thing. Like I said, shed your human camouflage. We stop pretending to be human. We can all be the slimy, like bug creatures that we actually are.
I like that. Yeah, maybe you're not a fan or whatever, but it's very fresh on my mind because it's coming out now. But the Last of Us HBO show, are you familiar with that at all?
I've played a little bit of I think the first game. I'm not a PlayStation guy. I unfortunately, I don't know. Fortunately, unfortunately, I don't know if you'll lose some followers or something. But I'm kind of an Xbox guy. I've always.
I don't play video games at all. I just love the idea of like a fungal thing actually consuming people. I thought that was very cool.
When I was in grad school, like I looked at a lot of the concept art for Last of Us, and I had a ton of it in my like research folder full of like I was just like pulling illustration work and concept art from all kinds of stuff as like visual research, and that was one of the touchstones. Like I played some of that game, and I really love like the kind of fungus monsters. That's once again, it's another like body horror thing where it's like there's no boundary between the human and non. Like you could be infected with this thing, and then what is it? Like, is it a human anymore? But it's not really a fungus anymore either. Like it's this new thing that comes about because of this hybridization. I love stuff like that. I think that like just the underlying. There's like two ways you can interpret it, right? There's like the underlying, like it could be like a reactionary fear where it's like I must protect the boundaries of my body against all disease and impurity. You know, it's like you can see that plays out in politics. We must protect the nation against all kinds of impurities, whatever comes very racist and you know xenophobic. But there's the other one where it's like, well, that just looks fucking cool to be a fungal monster. And what if that's really what we already are? Like, there's already like fungal spores in your body. There's already like bacteria all over it. So, you know, they say like 90% of the cells in your body are bacterial cells in your intestine. You know what I mean? Like you're already mostly not human to begin with. You know what I mean? Like, what are your bones? Your bones aren't even alive. Like you have a big part of your body is this non-living thing that's just exists. You're fucking skeleton. You know, so there's like the other side of it is to sort of embrace that and be like, well, it's weird and disturbing, but it's cool because of that. you know. So I find like I like Last of Us just as like a I don't know about like the I haven't watched the show, so I don't really know.
It's good.
It's good.
Yeah.
We have a
I've been pretty pleasantly surprised with it. It's very if you like the show, the only critique, which is really just more of a comment, is that even some of the cinematography and like the shots and like the perspective, like it is literally taken from the video game. They just recreate it in life. So it's like as long as you're cool with it being almost like a remake, but like high budget, it's pretty awesome.
I'll have to watch it because I played probably like I don't know the first 6 or 7 hours of the first game, and I did really enjoy it. We used to house sit or a dog sit for a buddy of mine, and he had a PlayStation, so I always play his video games. We would dog sit, but that was I haven't played any of those since then, since I don't have a PlayStation. But I'll have to watch the show because I did enjoy the game quite a bit. What I had played of it, the first few hours of that game are pretty cool. It's like the fungal zombie apocalypse outbreak, like first happening, and those are always like in any zombie movie and in any like movie like I always love the first few hours of the apocalypse, like when it happens. It's like kind of the funnest narrative, you know. Like I think what happened, like why, like for me, like Walking Dead became less fun is because it's like, I mean, how many zombies can there really be now? Like, come on, guys, like you have to have depopulated half the U.S. at this point. There probably aren't that many zombies left.
Yeah.
At some point, people are going to be like, "Hey, what if we just cooperate and then we'll survive better, and we don't have to be all weird about it." The fact that show like kept going, no, it's a dystopian hellscape, and every human hates every other human. I'm like, have you ever seen like a natural disaster happen on the news? Like, what's the first thing people do is like immediately go help each other. Like that's the first human instinct. It's like, oh, I want to help. I don't like the idea that we might all suffer and die if we don't cooperate. So I think like the first few hours is the most dramatic part. I think after, like I'd love to do, like I've had this idea to do like a zombie apocalypse story where it really is like this one group of people who think they have to go it alone, and they go through horrible trials and tribulations. They, members die, and there's all kinds of intrigue. They kill each other, and then they find out the entire rest of humanity has just been doing okay. Like they just started cooperating. They kind of figured out like, oh, this is a way to kind of control the zombie population. They've been doing fine. It's just this one group of people have gone through like the worst misery because they didn't want to have to like cooperate with other people, or they thought they couldn't.
Yeah.
I think that would be really funny. So yeah. Anyway, I'd be intrigued to see where they end up going with the show, because I know there's been like three games, I think.
I don't even know. I'm so new to it. I just was blown away by the first 2 episodes I've seen. Then the third one will come out tomorrow.
I might check that out.
Do you have any art books you want to show, or do you want to get to the area where we'll pull up some of your images and we kind of dissect them a little bit?
I mean, I showed the Dave Carson one. I have a bunch of other art books, but they are they're kind of hard to get to at the.
No, I understand. Yeah.
The way we have our couch is kind of like in this really small alcove, and we have 2 bookshelves on either side. The couch is actually kind of blocking the bottom shelves, and all my art books are on the bottom shelves. I have to move the couch. So I have a nice Ian Miller book that I had gotten a couple years ago that I wanted to bring out, but I'm like, I gotta move the freaking.
Is that the Art of Ian Miller? I just bought that the other day because I found a copy that was new. I hope it's not a scam. But I was seeing a lot of copies were going for like $1,000, and there was no way in hell I'm paying that. But I think I found one for like $100. I hope I get it, but I took a chance on it, But yeah, I'm pretty stoked to get that one. Somebody who I really like a lot, and I don't know if you have like a take on him at all. Whoops. You familiar with like Robert Williams stuff?
Yeah, I actually have one of his books too.
Yeah, I love his blend of like the kind of lowbrow pop culture reference, but then he has like some metaphysical stuff. Like, I don't know. He's somebody who like I saw his artwork in early college, and it's like technical level up here, like, and it definitely has like the comic book element to it as well. But then the fine art training, just somebody who I've really been just really looking up to. But yeah, let's pull up a couple of pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. Let's see how this works out. All right, so we got this first one here. I think this is a recent one, but it's Nucleus and Azath, and this is on Unspeakable Act. So I'll let you kind of go through kind of what you were thinking, maybe what the exchange was like working with the bands, like who came up with the ideas and what maybe your inspiration was.
Yeah, so this one is actually a really funny one to start with because when Brandon approached me to do this record cover, he was like, yeah, we don't really know what we want at all. He's like, I just know that both bands wrote a song about lizard people. He's like, that's about all I can give you. Like, we didn't, he's like, that wasn't like coordinated. It just happened that both bands wrote songs about lizard people. He's like, so I don't know. He's like, maybe do something with that. So I went for I was like, oh, let's do like a total like kind of callback a little bit to kind of like 70s pulp sword and sorcery, like Dungeons and Dragons stuff as well. I wanted to just do this like kind of fantasy setting that has has all these like reptile people on it. They wanted it in color for the as the album cover. Mm-hmm. You could see I did this one on bristle board, so you can kind of see like the sky. It gets a little overworked with some like cauliflowers in it because bristle board isn't really super great for like taking watercolor as well as like good watercolor paper. So
totally, yeah.
Something else I always kind of struggle with doing these, but so yeah, I just came up with the concept and they were like, cool, do it. And then after I finished it, that was when Brandon was like, let's just go all in for like a pulp like Sci-Fi Digest or something from the 70s and make the cover look like it's from like a magazine. And so whoever they got to do the graphic design, I think, did a pretty brilliant job on it.
The logo kind of had that look to it. I didn't pick that copy, but I know it was like right over here in the top corner. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but yeah.
It has like a price on it. It has like almost like fake articles that would have been in it or something, So it was one of those things like it was completely unplanned. Like none of us kind of knew what it was going to turn into, and we just kind of allowed it to kind of like we just kind of bounced off each other. Actually, it ended up working out really, really well, and those are the kind of jobs I really, really like a lot, where the clients like just do something we don't even know, and that sort of collaborative process, it makes it a lot more collaborative to me. It makes me feel like having a lot more of a role in what the finished product is, rather than just realizing someone else's vision.
Totally.
The product, the final result is kind of satisfying to me because I was responding to them and then they were responding to me, and nobody had a plan in mind. It just became this it just became the result we ended up getting. This was like one of the ones where I'm actually really pleased with other than the sky, I'm pretty pleased with the quality of the watercolor on this. Like, I feel like I did a pretty good job with the painting itself. I was trying to be much more careful, and I think even though like it's not as detailed as some of my other drawings, it's got a real nice like overall feel to it. Like I'm kind of pleased with that foreground serpent man and his like little severed human head that he's holding. I kind of like that. I kind of like the little like. I'm kind of pleased with my little callback, like Tatooine style, Star Wars style, like domed buildings. Like it kind of works well. Like I'm not. It's not one that I'm too down on myself about. I like the way it came out.
So with the choice to do it on Bristol, then was that mostly just because you can get better detail than like doing like arches, hot press paper or something?
It takes if the final thing that I'm going to be concerned with is how it's going to take the ink pen. Then I'm going to go with bristle. If it's going to end up like I've done a few recently where I've just used watercolor paper and just basically made them paintings. I didn't really end up going in with any ink pen work at all. Mm-hmm. Then the watercolor paper is much better for just like straight paintings. You end up having to compromise a little bit, but this is also the first watercolor image I did after buying like an actual nice set of Winsor & Newton watercolors. Like I bought a really nice set of pans, and the quality difference between that and like what I was using before,
it's huge.
I was using some shitty Reeves stuff, like wasn't really very good. This stuff, like the surface ends up still being nice and silky smooth, so it's like easy to go back over it and draw.
Yeah.
So it just came out really, really nice because the watercolor was just a joy to work with.
And do you just do like one or two layers then, so it didn't like start to really bend and warp on your surface? Or
so I always tape them down.
Yeah.
So if I'm doing it on Bristol board, the trick with Bristol is to actually, if you're going to paint on any paper that can accept wet media, because I used to do this when I would paint oil painting on like Arches paper. I used to get like printmaking paper and oil paintings on it. The trick with any kind of painting on paper is to tape the edges down all the way around. And what happens is when the paper takes up the water, the fibers in the paper expand. That's what causes the warping. But when it dries, those fibers contract again. And if there's nothing kind of holding the paper down, it will contract in any direction, which is why you'll get permanent warping in the paper. But if you tape the edges down, there's only one direction the fibers can dry, which is back flat. So the paper stays flat if you've taped the edges. So when you go back in to draw in the final layers, you actually still have nice flat paper to draw on. It's not warped very much by the use of wet media. That's a trick I learned when I was at CCS.
Yeah.
So always tape if you're going to.
So there's a whole white border on your original that you're not seeing, obviously, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, cropped in from that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's why the watercolor blocks come the way they come, with the edges all sealed down so that the paper doesn't have anywhere to go when it dries. It will dry back flat. It's the same principle.
Yeah, I like those like really tiny blocks too. If you just want to like sketch or do any kind of like, I don't do any plein air stuff, but if I take a quick like landscape photo, I just want to like exercise that muscle a little bit. That's a real joy to do.
Right. Yeah. I always fantasize about doing plein air painting, and I never get around to it, but I always like, man, one of these days I'm gonna go outside and just be relaxed and like do a painting of like a street scene or something.
Do you know James Gurney at all?
Yeah, I do.
He's the kind of guy, like, I love watching his like plein air videos, and he's so from like the old school, like everything is pre-digital, and he teaches as well, but there's no one really quite like him. Like he like invents little things too. He's just a brilliant guy. But yeah, Dinotopia when I was a kid was a big influence.
Yeah.
And then I also had one other one just very quickly, but like for my generation, like this is what got me inspired. Was Goosebumps, like
Nice.
I remember being 5 and like creating my own Goosebumps,
Nice.
Yeah,
I think what got me, if we're looking back that far, but what got me started was the old Ghostbusters cartoon, the Slimer the Real Ghostbusters, because the ghosts on that show are mostly monsters, and I was absolutely in love with that. And then obviously, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I had like a graphic novel omnibus of like volume 2 of the first original, TMNT run, and I used to read the shit out of that thing. I loved the art in it. I would draw Ninja Turtles endlessly over and over and over again, try to imitate the style of like Kevin Eastman. I just try to like mimic those guys, and so those were like big things that were in the late 80s and early 90s for me.
And the like illustrations and paintings that were on like those play sets and all the action figure, like the backing cards, those things just got me going so much.
Oh yeah.
Let's see what the next one is here. So, all right, we got a new one, Plague Patrol and Sewer Fiend. So this is a split, and I think this one caught a lot of attention of people. Just from my perspective, a lot of times you don't do a lot of stuff with like a human face. So I thought that was a nice thing to see. But tell me a little bit about creating this one.
So the guys in Plague Patrol are really into John Carpenter's The Thing, which is one of the reasons why I think we've continued to work together. We both are big fans of that particular movie and like kind of the universe or world that it kind of depicts. So, Radek from that band was just like, just we want a thing, we want a big thing monster. I was like, sweet. So
That's what I do.
I planned this. I'm like, well, I got to do the stretchy face. I got to do the Two Faces stretchy face kind of thing. That's such an iconic way of depicting the Thing monster. So I didn't do one. It's not like a 1-to-1. I didn't copy like the Rob Bottin, original like sculpture that he did for the movie. I went with that as a motif.
Totally.
And just surrounded it with all of the, various limbs and like organs that I, have kind of either become familiar with through drawing or have like kind of stuff I've kind of been aware of a little bit as like a biology major. I try to like put some of that stuff into the artwork. But yeah, it was a really, really fun one to draw. It was another one where I've started to try to put more stippling in. Like I kind of did this stippled transition in the background from like a dark background to kind of light. I wanted to give it a sense of depth without actually having to do a background that might fight with the drawing itself. I think it ended up kind of working pretty okay. But this one was one where I just kind of like took my time rendering it. I had a lot of fun doing a lot of the hatching work and kind of stippling work for it and trying to create different textures for all the various parts. I love the number of eyeballs I managed to fit into this one. Might be a record for me.
I think what's amazing about this one too is sometimes movement and detail kind of fight, but they work really well in harmony here. Like, and then your choice of doing that black into white background at that diagonal definitely has a lot of action to it, and it like suggests a horizon line so that when he's like going this way, like there's good foreshortening. Like, it's really amazing piece.
Thank you, appreciate that. Yeah, no, it was a really fun one to do, and it was like right up my alley. Just like a perfect Shoggoth.
So for this one, then, I'm just kind of curious. Like, I don't know if you'd ever really need to, but do you ever use like masking fluid at all to like, I don't know, because like some of this is like it's pretty solid here, and then you start to stipple out. Just kind of curious, or even with your watercolor piece.
I've not really gotten into experimenting with masking fluid yet. I've thought about it a little bit in the past like year, but I haven't found anything where I find it really, really necessary. Usually when I'm doing watercolors, if I want to mask something out, I just use like painter's tape, and I will just hand cut out whatever I want on with an X-Acto knife on a cutting mat, and then I'll stick it in. I'll make sure the edges are kind of nicely pressed down, and I'll watercolor around. And I find that works for masking out areas quite well. It's a technique I use with oil painting a lot too, is just to use tape. And so I haven't really had to experiment with masking fluid, but I imagine there would be more control there. I just haven't really given it much thought. Yeah,
I don't know how well it'd work on Bristol too. It works well with like the teeth of like cold pressed paper.
Cold pressed paper, yeah.
So this one, so this one's the split with Fetid Zombies, so Mark Riddick, and correct me if I'm wrong, but both you and Mark designed this together. So I was curious how that happened.
So when Mark approached me to do the split, I was really, really flattered that he really liked Infected Religion a lot, because it was just something I just wanted to do a band. When we were living in South Bend, there was like nobody to play with at all. Like I couldn't find anyone who was into the same stuff. My buddy Jason was into tech stuff, but it's not really the same thing as like, I wanted to do something that was a little more in the like late 80s death grind tip, not really his wheelhouse. So I'm like, well, I can play everything, so I'll just do it myself. And it was just like a lark. It was just like so I could make some music finally. It'd been a few years since I'd been in a band. And I put out that demo, and Mark like freaking loved it. And he like contacted me. He's like, "Hey, do you want to do a split?" I was like, "Really?" Like, whoa! Like out of the blue, I'm like, I've been a fan of his artwork forever, and I like Fetid Zombie, and I've like been like, just thinking he's also just like a really nice guy too.
Oh yeah.
So when he approached me, I was just like, "Fuck yeah, let's do it." So he's like, "Let's do a collaboration for the cover too, because I think it would be really great to do mix our artwork together." So Mark was like, I love about it too. He's like, "So I do all my artwork on
copy paper,
8.5 by 11 copy paper."
Yeah.
And he's like, and I don't. He's like, it reminds me of doing zine art from the '90s, and I don't like to work on anything else. And apparently, he also doesn't really archive any of it. He's like, so yeah, if you asked me to find a piece, I probably couldn't find it for you, because I basically just toss them wherever as soon as I finish them. Like I don't. He doesn't bother to keep any of them. But he did all the skeleton skull stuff that's on it. He's like, so I'll just draw. He's like, how do you want to do this? Do you want to do it digitally, or do you want to do it like you want to actually collaborate on paper? And I was like, I think it would be more fun to collaborate on paper. Like, let's do like almost like an exquisite corpse with it.
Oh, totally.
So he started the drawing off. I did it on his copy paper. I actually have the original in my flat file downstairs. He did his portion on the copy paper. He put it in a comic book protector, and then mailed it out to me with a huge care package. He sent me so much free shit. I'm like kind of embarrassed by how like generous that guy is.
I have my own story about that.
Yeah. So I get the piece, and I'm like, oh shit, this is awesome. So I immediately go in. I kind of start laying out pencils. I had some ideas for what I wanted to do with it, and I just basically kind of improvised in my usual kind of Shoggoth stuff. And so I got to draw directly on a Mark Riddick, which is pretty surreal. And then, I showed it to him. He's like, fucking great. Looks awesome. Let's go for it. So I did all the digitizing on my end and sent him the artwork. And then he did the whole layout for the cassette. Like, that was all him.
Okay.
So all that stuff that's on the left-hand side with my logo, his logo, and then like the way he kind of remixed the artwork and added in all that, like that stringy stuff, that's all Mark. Mark did all that shit. He actually put kind of an enormous amount of work into this, split with just this, just some dude's band, which was really, really gratifying. We were emailing back and forth quite a bit then too, and it was great because it was literally like he would just email and be like, "How's it going?" It was just literally like, "How you doing? Like, how's life?" Like we just had like a nice kind of cordial conversation going for a while there. So all around good dude, all around really amazing experience getting to do this. And and I have a half Mark Riddick, half my drawing original piece of art in my collection too.
Is it pencil or ink at the stage that you have then? Like, that's the one thing I was kind of confused because he shipped it to you. Was that still pencil?
No, or was he finished the ink, erased out his pencil lines, and so it was just his part and blank paper.
Okay, and then you filled it from there.
Yeah, so I went back in with pencil, did my part, did my contour lines, erased out my pencil marks, and then filled the whole thing in to finish it. So, it was kind of done like an exquisite corpse in that sense. Like, he finished his part, and then I just kind of added everything in around it that you see that's like tentacular and eyeballish, and those little monoliths and stuff in the background are mine.
Yeah, it's really cool piece, and I love that you guys complement one another really well there. Yeah,
I hope we get to do another one at some point because this one came out so nice. It could be really, really fun to do more.
Yeah, and you got to watch that episode I was talking about at the beginning. Look up the channel. It's really cool. Like you've already been able to see when Mark does something, he does it fully. So like he came to the show prepared. He did like little thumbnail sketches basically of stuff. And it was like, this is why this works. It's like a fucking masterclass. It's awesome.
I need to watch it. He did a really great interview with the Redefining Darkness guys who did that. Their podcast a little bit. It was up on Bandcamp. And I listened to the whole episode that Mark was on with them because he's also very like a fascinating artist as well. Like he's quite well trained. He could speak quite knowledgeably on art history as well. Like I love that about him. I think it's he's one of those people who's really, really well rounded as an artist. Mm-hmm. He's kind of one of those people I can listen to him kind of talk about stuff endlessly. Honestly, he's like a great interview subject.
Totally. All right, let's see what we got here. So we got first painting. So it's Inoculations, Celestial Putridity. And it sounds like all up to this point, even the anecdotes you have earlier, you've been working with the band directly. Is that pretty common, or do you ever work with like a management team or a label?
Occasionally I work with the label. Let's see, what was the most recent one where I worked mostly with the label? I'm trying to think here. I mean, honestly, even if I have worked with the label, it's usually been alongside the band. So some of the stuff I've done for $20 Spin, and some of the stuff I've done for for Universally Estranged, like they're on they're on Blood Harvest. Mm-hmm. And so I've like that's occasionally been where I've been talking to Rodrigo too. But mostly it's usually directly with the band. I've rarely ever worked with an art director. I have worked with a talent manager once. In one of my early commissions, that was really a really weird experience, working with a guy who was like a talent manager. It felt a very inefficient way of working, honestly, but that was an early commission. But mostly I work directly with the band. The band usually comes to me. Usually the band has a guy. If you play in bands, there's always a guy. The guy who takes
the
care
liaison.
of stuff. Yeah. So usually it's just communicate with one person from the band who's like kind of the person who's either most motivated to like deal with getting the record put out, or the person who's got the aesthetic drive to want to like talk to me about making the artwork. So for this one, they gave me a bunch of lyrics, I believe, and kind of gave me the rundown of what they were kind of doing for the record. I think they sent me an early mix of the LP, so I kind of listen to everything. I like to soak it in when I'm doing a record cover. I like to kind of like see what kind of vibe the record itself actually has. I like to kind of see sometimes they'll send me references of my own artwork that they like in particular, and sometimes they'll send me references from other artists' work or other images that they really, really like. So they probably sent me, if I remember correctly, they probably sent me kind of the whole package deal of like just everything they were kind of thinking about. And then, but they didn't have a specific vision in mind. They just wanted to give me a vibe, which is kind of my favorite way to work. They basically just wanted to build up the most articulated version of the vibe they were going for as possible, and then just be like, all right, so just do something for us. So I came up with this like Lovecraftian monstrosity, like manifesting in next to a planet, and they dug it. They were like, yeah, go for it. And so I painted it. The only thing that is kind of bugs me about this painting, a little pull back the curtain a little bit, is this is one of the ones where my color matching didn't really come out quite as well. Like the original painting, there's a lot more contrast within the creature itself. And for some reason, when I was trying to color match those purples, that contrast just kept leaking out of it. It either ended up being too blue, or it ended up getting too like those like kind of dark purples are actually much darker in the original painting. So
the ones near the center there?
The ones near the center, near that kind of yellow.
Yeah, it's like a yellow ochre.
Yeah. So that's the one thing, like if I could go back, I think a part of the problem was I was trying to, like this was before I realized I need to scan at night. I tried to scan in the daytime. I ended up with all kinds of color matching problems with it, but it still looks pretty good. I think the painting came out kind of cool, and it was a really good learning experience for me. Like I've done just a handful of painted album covers, and I'd like to do more. But each one is kind of a learning experience. Each one is kind of teaching me more and more about how to kind of compose this stuff. I mean, the biggest thing with paintings, like you can paint your entire life, and there's still things to learn. Mm-hmm. And the biggest thing with paintings for me is like figuring out an order of operations for the painting, like because it's all a logic of layers, and sort of figuring out what needs to go in each layer as you paint is like kind of the key strategy to kind of getting what the effect that you ultimately want. I think a lot of people who are trained as illustrators are given kind of a really effective formula. We're not really taught that in studio art. We're taught that painting is something you sort of feel your way through. And so I feel like some of the struggle I have in like coming up with in executing paintings is sometimes that I was taught to kind of feel my way through it. And actually there's like a good formula that's actually quite effective that I could probably be employing to paint these in a more efficient way. But I still think they turn out okay. And I honestly, sometimes the ones that are less slick, like artists get to a point where their work is almost too slick, and there's like, it kind of feels too overly refined. Right. I think some of the stuff where there's still a sense of clunkiness can actually be the work that's like a little more attractive to people for whatever reason. I remember learning that in undergrad too. One of my painting instructors being like, don't get too slick. Your paintings should always feel like you struggled a little bit. It's like they always feel a little bit better when it feels like you're pushing right at the edge of what you can actually do. If it gets too slick, if you get too comfortable with what you're doing, then you're not challenging yourself enough.
Kind of related, but not, because I wouldn't he's a modern day master, but when you're kind of talking about like the level of rendering and stuff, something that I've always liked about like Frank Frazetta's artwork is all the like soft edges and less is more in points.
Yep.
I feel like in some ways this has a little bit of that element too. Like you chose to keep the center part, that yellow, pretty solid. Whereas, correct me if I'm wrong, but I bet and sometimes you were tempted to like go deeper into the the creature.
So that was a choice from the very beginning. So that yellow ochre that you see is actually a very, very thin layer of paint over the white of the gesso board that I painted it on.
Okay.
So that is actually what you're seeing in that yellow is literally the first layer of the painting.
Got it.
And so I had chosen because of the way oil paint works. Like when you see it in person, it has a little bit more of a candy jewel effect to it, where it's like a layer of transparent yellow over white, so it glows a little bit more. And that's something you can do with oil paintings is if you just put color over the white, you get like kind of glowing colors. So that is the one part of the painting that was like, I had planned that out from the beginning. Like that part's going to be left mostly untreated, except for a little bit of that white that I kind of put in there to kind of give some sense of depth to it. But I was going to leave that part because I wanted it to have the feel of like it being like this maw is sucking things into another dimension almost, you know? It's
right.
like a mouth from some other dimension of space or whatever. So that was sort of planned into it from the beginning. The rest of it was largely the result of improvisation. I like kind of broadly blocked the creature in, broadly blocked in the planet, and it's like I always work on a technique of start clunky and then refine as you go. Like each layer gets more refined, and each layer you become more specific about what the details are. And so in the final layers, you finally articulate what all the details might be. I wanted this to have like that kind of like, sci-fi painting type feel to it, where a lot of stuff is brought up to a really high level of finish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I first saw this, I didn't even know it was yours, but then it makes sense now because like a lot of your shape choices are similar to your work. I guess so many people are just probably used to seeing your stuff in black and white. So it's very cool to see stuff that pushes you out your comfort zone. Here's the last one here. Yes. Now with this one, I don't know how you made it. So it's Molder and Gross in Decay with prosthetic records. Tell me a little bit about this one.
So this is actually one of the ones where they had Molder, the band had a sketch that they had done, which was like literally like stick figures. But it was basically the kind of what they wanted in roughly for the composition. They're like, this is where we're going to put the logo. This is where we're hoping that you could put some archways in it. We're hoping to have like a coffin with some stuff coming out, maybe like a rotting guy. And they had kind of like labeled everything they wanted in it. And so I set about kind of basically trying to realize that and actually give it form and depth and detail and make it as kind of slimy and disgusting and gross as they had indicated they wanted for it. And so this is ink and watercolor and gouache.
Okay.
So it was, if I'm remembering correctly, I did the entire black and white drawing first and actually scanned that in for them. That's why they were able to do a black and white shirt version of this. Because there's a black and white file that exists. If I'm remembering correctly, this was like, I was working on this in the middle of us moving to Lancaster from South Bend. So it was a very like mentally fucked time of my life. I don't remember.
Giving you PTSD.
I don't remember much about like working on it other than like sitting in this house where we had like no furniture, like on like a half broken chair with like the drawing board in my lap trying to finish this so I could get it into them by their deadline. But I do think I did the whole black and white thing first, and then I went in and did all the colors separately after the fact. And so it was like a ton of washes of color.
Yeah.
I think I probably went over this thing 3 or 4 times to get just like the color detail, the colors all in, and then it was like a separate layer of gouache to add in all the highlights and all the volumetric stuff and all the glistening bits onto it. So it really was like, I look at this one, I think it really is a pretty close marriage between a drawing and a painting.
Exactly.
It's as much a painting as it is a drawing when I did this one. And I actually was like, kind of surprised when I was getting finished with it at how the level of detail I had actually put into it. It's one of those things where I don't notice it when I'm working on it. And as I get to the end, I'm like, fuck, what did I do? Holy shit. There's like a lot going on in this. I didn't think there was I'm always like, there's not enough. I need to get more detailed with it. I'm never satisfied with it. And then I get to the end and I'm like, whoops, maybe I went a little crazy with this one.
You got enough negative space. The choice to keep that for the logo in the top left corner was choice. That way, it doesn't lose focus of the logo.
Yeah.
Bristol board as well?
Bristol board as well. Yeah. This is probably 15 by 15 or 16 by 16. I always do, several inches larger than the actual format so that they've got bleed, like room to crop for bleed. And they've got like, if they need to use like pieces of the artwork inside the layout, it's like big enough that they can easily pull from it. And they ended up doing that. I think the layout in the LP and the CD versions has like zoomed in bits from this artwork that are pretty pristine looking because I scanned it at 600 DPI. I mean, that was another whole other thing. Scanning this thing in like 4 slices and putting it back together in Photoshop. I bet that was, yeah, so much fun. Lots of fun. But it's huge. I mean, it ended up being a huge file. Like the 600 DPI version is a huge file. They did a flag out of this freaking thing. Like that's how I knew I like scanned it at a high enough resolution is that they were able to make a flag out of that.
True professional.
Yeah, try to be. I strive. Not completely untrained, self-taught, but do the best I can on the business end of things. But that was a fun one. That was one where like the delays brought about by the pandemic and like the supply chain delays was really brought home to me because I finished that piece of artwork at the end of August of 2021, and it did not come out until July of 2022. Like their hard deadline was it has to be done by September 1st of 2021, and it did not come out until like July 15th, 2022. It was a long. I was like, what the? There was a point where I was like, what the fuck happened to that artwork? Is that ever coming out? I didn't hear anything from Aaron for like months, and then finally in like April of 2022, he's like, oh yeah, by the way, the record's coming out in July. I'm like, thank fucking God. I sort of wondered what happened with that thing. That was a lot of man hours,
Yeah, I can imagine. That one definitely was awesome. Just because, like you said, blending the drawing and painting, I feel like it does a really good marriage of your skill set. So very cool.
Thank you. Yeah, that's also one where it's like, because I'm mostly dealing with the band too, like with a lot of these, it could be kind of a toss-up of whether or not I'm kept in the loop about what's going on with the release. That is one thing that can be kind of a downside is sometimes I'll hand the artwork off, I'll get paid, they'll say thanks, and then I won't hear shit until it comes out, and I'm like, oh, it finally came out, and I was not told it was coming out, but it's coming out at all. Yeah, I'm not the kind of person to pester a client, like I know, like if you're putting out a record, it's like a lot of fucking work, and people have a lot of shit to do, and I'm not gonna pester them. So it's like one of those things. It's a courtesy. I consider it a courtesy if a client keeps me in the loop on a release. So in that case, that was one where I didn't hear for months what was going on with it, and I was like, because I've done stuff where I've done record covers, and then the band is just collapsed, and then the artwork is just in limbo. It's like they paid for it, they have the license, but it's never gonna come out on anything,
Yeah, that would really stink.
So I've had a couple of times where that's happened, and it's been like, shit, well, I don't know what to do with that. But most of the time, like I said, most of the time my clients are pretty good about letting me know like what's going on, and hey, this is coming out. If you could put it on blast on your Instagram so that people know this record's coming out, that'd be great. It's getting to the point, it's like kind of surreal where like I really enjoy working with like up and coming underground death metal bands. I mean, a lot of times, bands will approach me and I'm like, I already love your guys' music, so that's great. I'm excited to work with you guys. And I want to be able to work with bands like that. But it's a little surreal that it's also getting to the point where bands will approach me and I have more followers than the bands. And they're like, yeah, you help promote the record because you actually have more followers than we do. It's like, wow, that's weird. It didn't used to be that way. So I don't know.
I
don't know how much.
Well, you're kind of like, you're beyond being an up and comer. You're established now, at least from my perspective. Like, you never feel that way though as an artist. You never feel established, but
no.
I mean,
there's always people like you see, like I said, you see like Matt Sticker doing something for Metallica, and you're like, well, I have a fucking long ways to go. I have a long ways to go. I don't think I'm going to get asked to do anything for Metallica or Megadeth for a while.
Riddick's had a lot of really big clients too, which is cool.
Yeah, Riddick's had. I remember Riddick when he did stuff for Scion when that car company was still around.
Oh yeah, they got really into the metal stuff. It was interesting.
They got really into the metal stuff. They had him design a car. It was kind of amazing.
Oh shit! I gotta look that up.
It was really you should look up Riddick Scion car design. It was really fucking cool. I mean, it's like just like a Riddick drawing of like a car that's like covered with skeleton shit. They had asked, they're like, we want you to reinterpret one of our designs as like a Riddick.
I remember there was like an Immolation single, a Meshuggah single that came out, and the Scion label. Yeah, I think some of those are kind of collectible now, though. Actually, the Immolation one.
Yeah, that was kind of a cool little thing. I was like, oh, there's some people who like some good shit running a company. That's fun. But yeah, so it's like one of those things. Like I know that I'm at the point where I'm like established. I don't have to like, beg for work. People are always approaching me to do stuff. But I also can see there's so much farther to go, and it's really just you just have to be patient. The piece of advice that I'll share that like Justin Bartlett shared with me years and years ago when I first like pestered him like how did you get to become an illustrator? How do you get work from clients? Like how do you do this professionally? And he was kind enough to email me back with like a fairly long email, explaining like, the best thing that I ever did, like the biggest piece of advice I could give you is just keep making work. Don't wait for clients to come to you. Make your work and keep putting it out there. And if it's good and if people like it and they're interested, they'll come to you. But don't wait. Don't wait to test your skills out. Keep drawing. Keep putting drawings out there. Use your social media to get stuff out so that people see it, and don't stop making work. Like just keep making work. And like I took that to heart and really started doing that. And yeah, it ended up working. Like,
did he give you that advice when you were in art school or before art school?
It was this was. Yeah, it would have been before art school when I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I was kind of thinking about illustration, and I wasn't really sure. So I was like, I was following him on Facebook and like seeing all the stuff he was doing. I mean, I was buying records that had his artwork on it. I was listening to The Secret, and I was listening to Dragged into Sunlight.
Dragged into Sunlight, yep.
I was listening to that
so
stuff.
Disturbing.
Yeah, so disturbing. Loving that artwork that he was doing, and like being a little whippersnapper, thought I could ask him for some advice. And so that was before I went back to art school. And then, like I said, like during that time, my mind kind of changed. I thought I was going to be a studio artist instead. And when I came back to like when illustration started to become a possibility, it was partly his advice of like, just keep making stuff, just make work. And it really is because I made work. It's because I went to art school and I was making work for myself that, honestly, that's the reason that Blood Incantation got into my work, was because I wasn't just like, Paul even said, he's like, you're not just doing like graveyards and demons. He's like, you were doing something like that's your own thing that was really, really close to our vibe.
Right.
And that's why what really tuned us into it was like, it wasn't the run of the mill shit that you were seeing get made by a lot of metal illustrators. I was very, very flattered by that, but that was largely because Justin told me to just make work, and it was like, well, I'll just become a studio artist, and then I just have to make work because there's no other way to make money. That's how that ended up working. Like I totally credit him with his generosity, to give me that piece of advice. He was also kind enough while he was suffering from his cancer, to ask me, as one of the many artists he asked to be involved in the fundraising project that he was doing. I haven't felt as comfortable sharing the piece that I had given him for that, just because I don't really want to make it about me just yet. If they end up putting something together, then I'll probably contact the family if they end up putting something together under like kind of I had given this piece of artwork to Justin at his request, and if you guys still want to use it, you can certainly use it. But I haven't felt like kind of weird about posting that piece of artwork just yet, because he never got around to actually putting together the I think it was going to be a calendar or something like that, or an art book. I don't remember what it was going to end up being, but yeah, I did a piece for that. I was really, really flattered and honored to be asked by him after so many years. Like, after I'd asked him for advice years and years ago, to have him come back to me and say, hey, would you like to be involved in this? I really like the work that you're doing. I was like, wow, you like the work I'm doing? Wow. Totally felt like awesome. A geek. So, yeah, geeked me out quite a bit. So,
yeah. All right. Well, at least on my end, I think this was a pretty solid interview. Do you have anything else that you wanted to share?
I don't think so, other than thank you for having me on, Lee. It was a real pleasure to talk to you. I think we had a pretty good conversation. I guess good luck editing it. I see you got 2.5 hours of material here, so. Woo.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think part of it is just it not being a really stiff interview, so maybe I'll chop it in half and post it, but I'll figure it out. But for anybody watching, definitely check out Lucas's artwork. You can find him on Instagram at Shoggoth Kinetics. Post stuff multiple times a week. You probably have bought a shirt with his designs on it. Stellar guy, and just awesome illustrator, and I'm really excited to see what he comes up with. So thank you, everybody, and hopefully we'll be able to keep this art series going with some other artists too. So thanks.
Thanks again.